So, hello everyone. How is everyone doing? My name is Mustaphacastles, and as you may or may not know, and thank you for clicking on this video, King, Queen, Monarch. So, how is everyone doing? How's everyone doing? I have been. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. Or at least I tell myself that. But what I wanted to talk about today was basically narrative and identity. I think in general, when going through a lot in your life, you tend to, I think I also talked about that in my last episode, you tend to kind of let other things kind of define you, you know? You let the stories that happen to you or whatever that you went through and just the stories that you tell other people kind of define you. But what if those stories were never there? Are you something? Who are you? And like what stays left besides the stories that we tell others or the stories that we tell ourselves? I think it's so an interesting thing that I could do a deep dive on. I think it's it's an amazing and kind of existential topic because at the end of the day, we as human beings ourselves, talking about individuals, you know, me and you, personally, we have stories, you know, that we tell others. We have things that kind of made us the way that we are. We have things that have molded us in ways that we might not have wanted, might not have expected, but it just happened to happen. And a lot of the time when I find myself kind of questioning these things, I kind of try and go towards doing some grounding techniques because it's kind of a spiral that you can easily fall into and it can get dark really easily, really fast. Because at the end of the day, like I said, we are individuals, we have our own stories, and sometimes it feels as if when we don't have those stories to tell others, what is left of us, you know? Sometimes just being there and sometimes just simply existing is not the identity that we kind of, I don't know, tell ourselves that we have, you know, or kind of say that this is my identity. I think it's just so fascinating to me because at the end of the day, identity itself is formed by so many external and internal factors. But what if those internal factors never end up being visible to others or even to yourself because in a hypothetical situation, you aren't able to kind of talk about it or you just don't really have anything to say about it? What stays behind? Like what stays? What is left? So is it that only whatever that I've been through and the stories that kind of contributed to my social life, is that kind of the person I am? Is it just simply the stories that I kind of tell others and tell myself that kind of form me, the person that I am? Or am I just a person without necessarily having to add multiple stories to the person I am? It may be a confusing topic to even talk about, but I think it's just in general when you kind of struggle with your identity your whole entire life and kind of don't really know what you like, what you do, because you didn't really or like rarely got the chance to actually focus on many hobbies besides those hobbies turning into coping mechanisms. It really it really is weird, or even, you know, it's specific to even talk about, because if those things never happened, I know at the end of the day they happened, so I can't really change anything about the fact that what if it didn't happen. But those things happened, and for me to kind of deal with those things, I found coping mechanisms, whether they were healthy or they were not healthy, but simply like them being coping mechanisms kind of gave me a story to tell others, you know? Like I said in the last video as well, talking is one of my coping mechanisms, and talking about what I've been through or just kind of putting things out there always felt as like it just felt as if I was kind of the thing is that in general talking about my issues has never really made me feel better. The only thing that it did make me feel is it made me feel less alone. You know, it did not necessarily make me feel better, because I knew for a fact that nothing that anyone could say to me was ever going to kind of contribute to me feeling better about whatever I've been through, because whatever I went through is simply just there. I went through it. And okay, it's nice to have someone say like, I'm here for you or whatever. But at the end of the day, that isn't going to, you know, change the way I view things. That isn't going to fully change the way I kind of perceive whatever I've been through. But then again, through those coping mechanisms that I had or still have, it kind of, when talking and socializing is one of them, and currently not really being able to kind of socialize and talk about and tell people other stories about who I am, and what I do, there isn't really much left of who I am. And I think in general, when we live in a society where everything kind of goes off of socializing, of course, I mean, it's the cure, like the core thing of human beings. We talk, and talking is getting to know people. Getting to know people is getting closer to people. Getting closer to people is getting new interests from them. Getting new interests from others is actually finding some things that you actually enjoy yourself. When getting to know others, and whatever they like and whatever they don't like, you will kind of start to decide for yourself whether you like things or not. I remember once talking with someone, and I started like kind of realizing the differences that we had growing up. And then again, it's not necessarily that it had something like I didn't really like envy them or whatever. Like, no, that has nothing to do with it. I don't care. But it did really like make me think of how people view a lot of the situations that they go through. Also, you can really notice how when people talk about certain people, like other people or their significant others or their friends or their hobbies, it's safe to say that you could kind of connect the dots and see why it became what it is, or why they like that person. For example, me, someone who was kind of calm and would like to hear and kind of grounds me in a way, or kind of balances a lot of energy, I suppose. I mean, not really. I don't really have that much energy lately, but whatever. Either way, I just kind of get this like excitement when talking to others, and I kind of search when talking to others. I kind of search the opposite. I think it's like a polar opposites, because I'm the one who kind of holds, used to hold at least most of the energy, whether that was intended or not. At the end of the day, I did have so many friendships where it was kind of one-sided, that I kind of contributed more to the friendship itself, contributed more to them than they even did to me, or contributed more to them than I did to myself. But then again, like I said, it was one of my coping mechanisms. I like talking because it was kind of my way of kind of forgetting whatever had happened, And when I started less socializing with people and kind of focusing more on my own and talking less to others and whatever I've been through, I started noticing that it felt as if I became less of myself. And at the end of the day, it could be that I became more of myself, I don't know. I don't know what more or less of myself is. At the end of the day, I'm 20 years old. I have been through a lot, so it's not like you have like your whole life ahead of you. Of course I do, but do I really though? Either way, it's just kind of, I don't know. Either way, so it's like, I forgot what I was even talking about. But either way, let me just continue on. So yeah, like I said, I grew up socializing a lot, and socializing was like one of my coping mechanisms. And when I started, that's what I was talking about, when I started being more on myself and not really being able to socialize with myself, I'm falling into repetition here just to kind of refresh my memory, I started feeling as if I was more of myself or even less of myself. And then I said, I'm 20 years old. Either way. So yeah, it started feeling as if I was kind of losing touch with myself, because like I said, the quote that I had decided for this video was, was, are we just the like the stories that we tell others, or tell ourselves? The fact that when I would talk to others about what I've been through, not necessarily like vent or whatever, just simply talk or like mention something, in a way, it was kind of reflecting onto myself. I was kind of telling myself that story. I do talk a lot to myself. Like this is the way that I talk to myself. But just in general, talking to others kind of manifested my stories and kind of the stories that I tell others, instead of just simply what I've been through, letting that kind of define me. I used to first kind of go to others and see what they think of a situation, and then eventually kind of circle on and kind of make an analysis of it myself. Mostly growing up, because I did have confidence. I was really independent, but when growing up really independent on so many different aspects of life, you tend to kind of even question your own independence, because at the end of the day, we are human beings and we kind of have to rely on others in many different ways. And hopefully, and just in general, hopefully, eventually you will be able to rely on yourself. But, growing up, you are supposed to be clinging on to others and kind of being able to rely on others, and eventually kind of start and develop that, independence of it all. But yeah, so like I said, when I started kind of not isolating, but kind of isolating, I started, talking less to people. And that way, I would find myself kind of questioning who I even was, without kind of contributing to others. When going through all of the things that I've been through and all of the difficulties that I've been through in life, they were always kind of connected to someone else. And when kind of getting out of that mindset, not necessarily mindset, but kind of getting out of that setting where the things that I'd been through were always, connected to other people, of course, when being alone, it was kind of difficult for me to kind of accept the peace, I got so used to, I always say used, but anyways, I got so used to talking to others, and from talking to others, kind of contributing, or kind of forming my opinion on so many things, or kind of forming who I am, and maybe in a way to kind of be closer with someone. I'm thinking of one specific person where I did do that, but that was like a whole different situation. I think that was also kind of seeking the validation that I've always searched for, never really gotten. But yeah, like I said, isolating myself got me into a new setting that I wasn't really used to, where there wasn't really anything bad going on, nor were there specifically good things going on. And it was like kind of a no man's zone. But at the same time, I felt as if I wasn't growing or doing worse. I just didn't really feel alive, because, like I said, the stories that I would tell others were kind of, in the way, the stories that I would tell myself to kind of contribute to my identity and form who I am. And it was always such a difficult thing, because now when I'm like more on my own, I mean, this is like the most alone that I've been, not in a bad way necessarily, but just the longest time that I've been actually just not really socializing too much and kind of focusing on myself. I did realize a lot of things about myself, like I said, the things that I've been through, and when talking to others and kind of forming my opinion on so many things, but whether that be influenced by the people that I would talk to or not, or kind of having them decide the situation for me, I had to kind of do that on my own, and it's not like I wasn't used to doing things on my own, I did that my whole entire life. But when a few years ago, I kind of felt a connection with someone, and that connection was in a way where I felt as if I could rely on them and kind of let my guard down. I'll just say it hyperbolic, the first 17 years of my life, I was really independent, like, just like, I'm exaggerating, of course, but just I was like relatively independent And because it was mostly stemming off of trust issues and not really abandonment issues, because once kind of I was starting to get close to someone, or once I started getting closer to someone, I would directly get attached. And attachment is like my biggest fear. It's not like a nightmare of mine. It's something that I can't deal with. Definitely with BPD, attachment is just the worst thing. It just goes from having splits, whether they be in positive way, like it's never really a positive way, but whether they be in a more aggressively manic-y way, or like a euphoric way, or in like a really depressive way, you know. But that connection that I had, it gave me this different sense of connection. It gave me this different sense of attachment where I kind of did feel safe. And that's when I kind of allowed others to kind of form my opinion. You know, at the end of the day, the people that we talk with on a day-to-day basis kind of influence the way that we view things, you know, whether that be intended from their side or whether that not be intended, you know, it really doesn't matter. A lot of things happen without us noticing. A lot of things change us without us necessarily wanting them to change us, you know. And it really is that the people that you hang out with, they do have an influence on you. It's not like I'm saying that you will fully change or like do a 180-degree turn. Like, no, eventually at the end of the day, you will be able to rationalize certain situations. But for me, I wasn't able to kind of rationalize anything. I wasn't able to regulate my emotions in so many situations. And I had gotten used to kind of blaming myself for a lot of situations, that when I finally was able to kind of talk about the situations and kind of talk about what I've been through with others, it fully changed the way that I had told myself that story, you know. At the end of the day, when you're a kid or growing up in general, a lot of things that you, like, I experienced things that I should not have experienced, for example. And, you know, the brain at that age, or just in general, isn't supposed to deal with those things. But even at that age, doesn't know how to deal with that thing, you know. It isn't able to properly kind of regulate the emotions and properly deal with it in a healthy way, that it eventually got me BPD, of course. But, you know, I grew up blaming myself for a lot of situations because it was my way of kind of giving them the closure that I needed or wanted. But at the end of the day, when talking to others and kind of realizing that, okay, the stories that I had told myself are completely wrong. Not necessarily that when somebody else tells me something, it just like fully, like it does, like it's not like when somebody else tells me their opinion on the event that I've been through, that it fully changes or invalidates the way that I view the situation. But at the end of the day, the fact that I had asked multiple people that, hey, this and this happened to me, and kind of they, you know, like their opinions correlated, I had noticed that, okay, so all of these stories that I had told myself to kind of deal with those situations, they might have been helpful in the moment, or they might have been helpful growing up. But then kind of realizing that, okay, this and that, being the stories that I told myself, aren't like they don't make sense, you know. It was like, it made sense, like after a while it made sense that, okay, the only reason that I had made those stories was simply to tell myself this is what that is, just to kind of put it on the side, deal with it, and in a way just kind of continue on growing up and being the person I want to be or whatever. But when all of those stories that I had told myself to kind of convince myself about a lot of things that I've been through, and just to kind of, whether or not to justify them from the other person's side, or whether or not to kind of blame myself for it, it fully changed the way that I viewed everything about my life growing up. And when that fully changed, I literally had such a weird spiral, like existential crisis, in a way that it felt, I mean, at the end of the day, I knew that the things that I went through, like, like later on, of course, I knew that they weren't okay, or like they weren't supposed to happen. But still, your brain has a really powerful way of kind of making you believe things that aren't there, just because it has a way of filling in gaps with the given information when not really being able to process information, you know? When I started, like, when I saw those events happening to me as love, or as, I don't know, like, just anyway, kindness or whatever, I saw them like that because I didn't really have another way to see them, you know? And then I would kind of tell myself, yeah, this, that, and that happened to me, and this, that, and that is my story. And this is a story that I do tell myself about the situation, because I was actually kind of convinced that that is the truth, you know? I'm also a really stubborn person in a way that I don't really want my opinion to be changed. And when I eventually, with that connection that I was talking about, did eventually kind of like put my guard down and finally kind of let someone else be there for me, it felt so weird that not only I started self-sabotaging the whole thing, but it fully changed me, you know? I would talk to others, I would get attached, and a part of me would go away. I would tell my story, like I would tell myself a story, or kind of say, well, this happened to you, so this, like, that's who you are, and I would just go on with my life. But that started building up so hard that when I started being more alone and never really have something to go through to make a story of and tell myself that that is my identity, it felt so weird that I just started kind of reminiscing and even looking back at the situations to give them a whole new meaning. And every time that I would try and give them a different meaning, it was as if a part of me was disappearing and then reappearing out of nowhere. A part of my identity just disappearing and randomly being filled in with random information that I never really had about myself, or even convincing myself of events that never really happened just to kind of fill in those gaps. I know this is a really weird episode. I know this is a really existential thing to even talk about, or maybe it doesn't even make sense, but it makes sense to me. And I hope it does make sense to others. But sometimes it's like we need to like remember that the stories that we tell others and the stories that we tell ourselves not only don't always align, but they don't necessarily are true, you know? The things that you have been through don't necessarily, like, and that you've been through and the way that you viewed them are valid, of course. The way that I viewed things back then and the way I dealt with things are valid. But looking back at the situation and looking at how I let that define me and let that kind of be a story to tell myself was not really anything that contributed to me feeling better or worse. Like, it just simply made me feel worse. It was just a way for myself to kind of deal with things. And once I really started realizing that, okay, so now I'm talking about this to others and it doesn't really appear that normal to them, I started realizing that, oh, I think I have to change my way that I view the situation, you know? It wasn't like I was fully going to let the way that they viewed the situation fully change me. Like I said, it's not going to like fully make me invalidate the way that I dealt with it, but it did really make me realize how much I kind of had normalized, generalized, and justified the situation that I was going through just to kind of deal with it and put it on the side and make it a story that I could tell myself, not knowing that it would be really difficult to realize, like not knowing that it was going to get really difficult when I started realizing that the stories that I had told myself and told others didn't really form me in the way that or didn't really align with the actual events, or didn't even align with who I was. When I started looking back at so many of the hobbies that I went through, like that I did and enjoyed. Not only, of course, I grew up neurodivergent, I have ADHD, so like it's a common thing, you know, we kind of jump from hobby to hobby. But then again, those hobbies, when I look back at them, so many things were like perfect correlations with the things that I'd gone through, that it didn't feel as if it was like something I actually enjoyed. Even so many like I did swimming. It didn't, like, it wasn't really even a hobby. I think I correlated with something. I'm not going to say what exactly, but I correlated with something. And of course, it's something like in our family, you know, everyone does it. And we live near the beach, from Lebanon, where I am, like where I am from, I guess. But it just felt as if so many things that I'd been through, so many hobbies that I've been through, felt as if they were just simply a mere reflection of the things that I've gone through. And then it was such a weird thing to even talk about, or, I don't know, analyze, that nothing was like naturally formed for me to enjoy. There wasn't a single thing or single hobby that I had that was actually just a story that I actually developed myself. So many things were created in ways for me to simply have a solution, not even a solution, just to kind of have an explanation for something that I should not even have had an explanation for. Or so many things were hobbies, like so many hobbies were things, or were just coping mechanisms, and they weren't really hobbies. Talking to others did contribute, you know, of course, I loved other people, but then again, kind of getting scared of attachment stopped me from developing many friendships because of the things that I've been through, and because of the stories that I had to create around the things that I've been through to justify or whatever, tell others, and that eventually, letting that eventually be who they see. But of course, the events that happened, you know. It's not like the stories that were told around them, I mean, like, what that I told around them, didn't exactly align with them. No, they exactly, like, they were perfectly, and, you know, they aligned. It was, like, exactly the same thing. It's just the way that I saw the situation and dealt with the situation that really made me, that kind of put me back so many steps, because like at the end of the day, those were things that I was really like young with to deal with. But they set me back, it felt as if they set me back so many steps, because once I actually got to the age of 17, 18, that I actually had to start dealing with those things, I started realizing that those events really did mold me in the person that I am today. They did really form me in the person that I am today. Every hobby, every connection that I had with someone, everything that I did, hobby, I sing, the music that I listen to, the books that I read, the attachment issues that I have with so many things, they were all just simply results of the things that I've been through, just molded into different ways of dealing with that situation. And it was so scary to realize. It was, like, of course, I realized that when I was so young, you know, it was like, I was like 13, 12, like 13, 14. But it's not like I then started being able to deal with them, because it was like event after event, things happening. So, are we really the stories that we tell ourselves? I don't know. For me, it's sadly I am, kinda, but then again, I'm not. I don't know. I still don't know who I am. And I'm not really, I mean, I'll find eventually. But yeah, I think you guys have heard me talk enough for tonight, wherever you are. If you want to reach out to me, if you have anything to talk about, you can always message me on Instagram, which is Mustafa Mohsen, like Mustafa, Mustapha point Mohsen on Instagram, and mustaphacastles on TikTok. And make sure to subscribe if you want more videos. I mean, I'm going to upload nonetheless you subscribe, but I would appreciate it. So without further ado, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Mustafa out.